cousins and goats, where he forced them to perform... Do you know what? I think I've overwritten that one. That would be evil. But anyway, what about today's subject? Which way will our panel vote? I think it's only fair we do all of our thinking naked in a hot tub with our bits floating about. Because it's Hugh Hefner. Helping me decide, a comedian who can be funny on everything from gender politics to Anne Widdecombe's hair, which is essentially the same thing. It's Stephen, stick a couple of ice cubes in it at Christmas. Bailey's.
Hello.
We also have a comic performer who started her career in Australia, but the gender politics were just too advanced and liberal there, so she moved to the UK instead to smash gigs here. It's Beck Hill.
Yay. Gigs did not approve.
And a comedian who once politely asked if maybe we should mock both sides of the Brexit debate. He was then labelled a right-wing extremist, ostracised and pelted with white hoods outside the BBC building. It's Simon Evans. Before we crack on with perhaps one of the most confusing subjects we've had on Evil Genius, Hugh Hefner, would you like to share anything you're evil or genius at with me, panel? Beck?
Yeah, I once stole a microwave.
Now I can't decide where you're going to stick that, evil or genius.
It's quite in the kitchen, mate.
It's quite a heavy thing to run off with, isn't it?
Well, I was genius about it, but I used it for evil. So I worked at, there used to be I probably shouldn't say this on a recording, but I used to work at Funland in London, which is like a huge...
Classic microwave destination.
It's like an arcade, and I went behind the prize desk, and one of the prizes was a microwave, and I just moved here, so I needed one. So I used to hold on to all the leftover tickets from people's prizes and pocket them, and after 3 months I saved up enough for the microwave and sent my housemate in with them on.
It's like the Shawshank Redemption of
microwave. Yeah, thank you.
That's like a nice better. That's like a genius.
Yeah, but they went... The arcade went bankrupt and they no longer run, so I think that puts me in the evil pile.
If only there was somewhere we could send you to for punishment, but that was done 200 years ago.
Free trip home, mate.
Stephen?
I've got a genius thing. I can speak other languages, which people are shocked at because I'm not very smart in this language. I can speak French, Spanish, German, and I can count to 4 in Korean.
Hang on a second, you speak French, so you're like quadrilingual or something?
Yeah, I don't know if that's what it's called, but yeah. I'm so smart and sexy.
Are you fluent in French, Spanish and German?
Yeah.
And you had a talent like that from when you were a kid, or is it something you just picked up at school and you sort of worked at it?
Well, I was just really good at languages, so then I did it to degree level and then had to go and live in all those places as part of my degree, then just picked it up. And then the reason I can count to 4 in Korean is because I'm a black belt in Taekwondo as well. Look at me just smashing it in the dick, guys.
Well, I mean, I know it's terrible, isn't it? But
now you're attracted.
Yeah, I know. But do you speak Spanish with like a... You know, you're like, tengo cuidado, you should probably have caution there, mate.
Listen, I know you're taking the piss, but I used to keep my Mancunian accent doing it because I was like, I just feel like I'm taking the piss if I'm like, I felt like I was taking the piss, so I'd be like, bonjour.
Bonjour, avez-vous une bomb cake? Simon.
Well, I've got nothing to compete with
that.
That
was crazy.
Actually, out of nowhere, 4 languages and Taekwondo. I accidentally ordered, am I allowed to talk about branded coffee capsules?
Yes.
I accidentally ordered 300 decaffeinated Nespresso capsules recently, when obviously I wanted caffeinated ones because nobody drinks it for the taste, right? And so now when my wife asks for a coffee, that's what she gets, and she doesn't know. She's been drinking decaffeinated for nearly a month.
That is
until I get through them.
Yeah, so you'll fall asleep quicker.
It's actually good for her, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, anyway, it's time to crack on because we are exploring Hugh Hefner today. Now, born in 1926, served in the army, founded Playboy in 1953. Of course, he expanded into TV stations, casinos, nightclubs. He then became what most of us all know as the old Hef. It feels like he was old his whole life, but he was young once. And he lived in his dressing gown with pipe in the Playboy mansion from 1974 until he died.
1974.
Oh, Becky, I did not think you would be the one that would crack the 1974 pun, but well done, through the net. He died in 2017, having bought a burial plot next to Marilyn Monroe for $75,000. He was 91. He was survived by his wife, Crystal, who was 31. No, they didn't. Although he did actually say as a first fact off the bat that Viagra changed his life and gave him a second flowering as a man. I know. So has anyone got any opinions about Playboy or Hugh Hefner before we start pillaging the envelopes?
That's a bit creepy that he wanted to be buried next to Marilyn Monroe, isn't it?
It's creepy because that was how, if you don't know, Playboy was started on a tiny budget. He was convinced there should be a magazine for men that was both classy, full of literature and stylish furnishings and cars, and had a bit of naked female flesh in there as well. It didn't exist. It cost a lot of money to start a magazine. For example, Time magazine cost $80,000 when it was started back in the 20s, so he had nothing. He was down to his last grand, and they needed a centerfold, and he knew the person who owned the Marilyn Monroe photographs lived in Chicago. He went to the guy thinking this guy's going to ask for 10 grand, 15. I was like, I tell you what, if you give me 600, we've got a deal. That's how Playboy.
So the photographs already existed.
They existed. They were owned coincidentally by someone in Chicago where Hefner was from. I'd imagine he had to suppress his laughter for a few minutes before he negotiated the guy down to 500. Wow. Any thoughts about Playboy? I'm sure you
Okay.
have it as a teenage boy.
Well, I mean, funnily enough, I did have Kelly Brook on my wall, but just in case my friends came over. So I did have that on my wall, but obviously she wasn't nude. I had like a nice, tasteful one. But I'm not like a poster. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs yet, but I just like.
It's fairly straightforward.
All the story comes.
But I do feel like I've only known him, like you said, as like this cute little old granddad, so I find it really hard to take him very serious as well. Especially, you know, when he's like cropped up in like Sex and the City, just walking around in his robe and stuff like that. I'm like, I think you're really funny, like you're really cute. I wish you would have been my granddad.
Simon,
from your introduction, he's self-evidently a genius. Obviously, you know, is
of what?
Of self-expression and of sociological change, but also of having an extraordinary life, as you say. You know, like the second half of his life was as good as the first half. It almost feels like Viagra had to exist in order to sustain Hugh Hefner. It almost feels as if it came into being purely as a reflection.
Years ago.
In the end, he was taking so much of it that when he cut, he was like an avatar. He actually was blue. So we're going to open the first envelope. Beck, I'll give you the honour. The first Hef envelope. Let's dive straight in.
A great platform for writers.
So,
I know this because he published loads of my writing before he passed, so...
when a lot of... Well, we tend to exist in a bit of an angry lefty bubble of which I'm afraid I am part. So I've had to sort of re-educate myself when it came to Playboy, and I was surprised that many of the authors I revere were first published, let alone published in Playboy. We're talking Updike. I've actually got a list here. Updike.
I think that was a photo, mate.
Updike. I think Updike was a photo. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Norman Mailer, Alice Denham, Kingsley Amis. If I was to say to you name a publication that had both Camille Paglia and Germaine Greer in it, two feminist titans, you wouldn't be surprised to learn Playboy was the magazine. It was progressive, it was literary, it was creative, it was libertarian as well as liberal. How can a magazine so packed full of literary goodness be looked down on by, I would say, let's be honest here, 90% of the people we would share a stage with in comedy? Let's be honest.
Well, I generally found on stage with Roger de Courcy and Jim Davison, so I would probably withdraw myself from that.
What did Arthur actually
But I think it was always a running joke, wasn't it? Oh, I only read it for the articles, but it was true. I used to get it occasionally, and there were loads of other porn mags. I mean, it wasn't as if you couldn't get other porn mags. The reason you chose Playboy, which was at least a quid or two extra than the Penthouse, was it had really good quality reading in it. Even in the 1980s, after that first sort of wave of literary, it was incredibly progressive in its time. And you're right, it was libertarian thought, and the fact that the libertarian thought was partly motivated by the desire to free young women from the shackles of Christian morality, is perhaps the debating point, but it certainly worked from that point.
Were they freeing women from shackles just so they could bone them a better angle?
How's our guy? Did he throw up in the back seat yet?
Right.
I mean, I don't know how it
Out
works.
the shackles and into the ears.
Well, that's the feminist argument.
Well, I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's not a magazine I read, and I don't know a lot about heterosexual sex. It seems wrong to me. But, like, I read Danny Minogue's autobiography. Of course I did, it was not my story, and it wasn't. And what I found out was, like, she took a hard time to get any job, and then he gave her a cover, and she was, like, had a lot of creative control and was very, like, tasteful and blah, blah. So in that way, I'm like, well, I don't know, I've never really looked down on it.
Madonna was at a cover as well in I remember that one. She was wearing top very much like Bex, actually, funny enough.
Jumper with Bart
It wasn't Bart Simpson, it was just a sort of yellow and black check, but if you squint at it, yeah, it was a similar thing.
Alright, yeah, sure.
Beck.
He's gonna try and get buried with me, right?
Beck, can he square the feminist circle? Is it a form of feminism if the women are completely in control of the shoot and empowering, but ultimately it's naked flesh for pervy men to look at? Can you ever square that circle?
I don't think that's my circle to square.
Good one.
It's, yeah, I think there's arguments, there's clearly arguments on both sides, but it's kind of like, so Playboy, from what I know of how it started and its roots, it sounds like the internet now, is that it gave a lot of people a platform to talk that couldn't normally before. It meant that a lot of people who were like, oh, boobs, great, may have accidentally learned something by reading the articles when they had finished coming, and and so like, and the internet.
I really love Norman Baylor, but my forearms are massive.
I wonder whether there'd be a couple of minutes, you know, allow the tristesse to pass.
Sorry, Jack, sorry.
Anyway, that's my so well framed.
Carry on.
And then the internet's like that, because the internet means a lot of people get to talk who didn't have a voice before. It means that we're coming across new thoughts and that sort of thing. And at the same time, the internet has also been incredibly popular because porn is on it, and it probably wouldn't be where it is now if it weren't for that, or as quickly. So I don't know, like I'm not too keen on the fact that we live in a society where that's what women are sometimes just boiled down to, but I don't know.
And I hear it a lot from girls going, please stop patronising us. I enjoy being a sexual object. That is what I feel powerful when I'm like, you've got Emily Ratajkowski who keeps coming out with this. I'm a feminist. This is my bum. These are my boobs. Look at me, men. I'm controlling you. Do you think that's just bullshit? So then they just like getting their boobs out?
Well, I just think if you get paid to like do what you want, then you're going to be pro it, no matter what anyone else says. Someone could say to me like, well, people do say to me I shouldn't be doing comedy.
Hold on, Stephen. I have got gay specific question for you.
Okay.
Gay specific. So initially, Hef, the first edition was 1953. Let's just sit there for a second. So initially, of course, Hef, product of his time, it should be a man and a woman, blah, 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 traditional homophobia. But as the magazine grew and his liberality grew, he was there at the rights, not just civil rights, which we'll talk about in a moment, but was also talking about gay equality and stuff. Is it not the case, if it weren't for magazines like Playboy going, yeah, we all have sex is part of life and it's pleasure, wasn't that, if you like, the little freebie extra film we got before we started talking about gay sex? Was it without that, we may never have had gay liberation, right?
I was going to say, without that, we wouldn't have had gay sex.
Well, that happened as well.
I mean, maybe. I think it definitely made everything, like, more open. And I think it was a smart magazine. Like, I think a lot of the women that were posing everything, like, we kind of talk about them as if these are, like, dumb airheads just posing. But actually, a lot of them, from the documentaries that I've watched, not the porn, thank you, are, like, very smart and making informed decisions. So I do think he was, like, by making it liberal and move forward, yeah, it probably did help gay sex in some way, or talking about sex anyway. I mean, we're really bad at talking about sex, aren't we?
Playboy had a byline, which I'm paraphrasing here, which was, if you're somebody's sister, wife or mother, please pass us along to the man in your life. So it's quite categorically not for girls. Boys clubs, smoking in the brandy lounge, discussing the gold stands and all that.
It's hard to discuss Hugh Hefner, like, because I think that Hugh Hefner or not, this would have happened. Because we are in a society where, for such a long time, women were seen as creatures and of beauty rather than that, and that's been built on. We're moving forwards as a society, but that was always going to happen. There's always been porn. It's always going to keep going. So I don't know if we can be like, oh yeah, Hugh Hefner gave them no, someone else would have done it. Someone else would have come along and been like, you know what?
Hugh Hefner didn't invent porn. What Hugh Hefner's thing was to create the idea that women were like luxury objects. They're presented in Playboy in the same way that you might present like a really high-end Swiss watch or something.
It's true.
There was always loads of porn out there. There's porn.
But,
you can get like Victorian porn, there's lots of etchings and that sort of thing.
But he was the first to put it on the new shelf in
Yeah.
a magazine where you could take it off, flick through. I mean, when he was first published Playboy, you were not allowed to show a married couple in bed together on television, even if clothed. This is how backward we were. And he fought against this stuff. Or did he? Did he just borrow the rhetoric of liberal people because he wanted to look at boobies?
I think if he just wanted to look at them, he could probably have taken a shorter route than creating an enormous empire. And
Yeah, but was he just a porn? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be against my own gender, but you see men say it all, use language like that all the time. Well, come on, man, it's just fun. Everyone's getting naked. You're missing out on the party if you don't take your clothes off. Translates to, I want to look at your boobies.
I think he was a good businessman. I think what happened is at the time porn was very much an under-the-counter thing, and it was seen as very like, stupid, drooly men type thing. And what he did is he went, yeah, but what about the thinking man who also likes to jack off?
That was one of the first straplines that was discounted.
Yeah.
For the thinking man who likes to jack off. Now, I'm of the in-between age, so I actually just had a short era of traditional paper porn hunting.
The only thing I would say is I think more important was the invention of the birth pill, really, the contraceptive pill. I think the invention of the pill changed everything, and the fact that he launched the magazine, just ahead of that and got well established. But that was the sexual revolution, wasn't it? Sex without consequences.
He was incredibly pro women's abortion and contraceptive rights, like passionately speaking about it. But again,
for that reason,
why? I want to legalise weed. Why? Come back to me in a couple of hours. There's a Family Guy's on. Same principle. Stephen, if you could just crack open the next envelope.
Yeah. Ooh, Holly Madison.
Yes. Now, Holly Madison is someone that spoke out about her time in the Playboy Mansion. So we've been quite eloquently talking about the feminism of Hefner, how he's liberated us all, what a lovely, friendly guy in his dressing gown. Let me just read something to you. Madison says that sex was, these were her words, sex was a requirement of living in the Playboy Mansion. The group sex occurred twice a week, Southend United, after Wednesday and Thursday club nights. After they went out in Hollywood and got VIP treatment in the clubs, there would always be orgies when they got back. On evenings, when they weren't required to be at home, there was a 9 p.m. curfew. So this is starting to sound a bit sex cult control-y here. Hefner treated her like she was stupid and criticised her looks. She wasn't allowed to wear red lipstick. He hated her short haircut, telling her, "You look old, hard and cheap." She developed a stutter and as a consequence tried to speak as little as possible. Less than a year after living there, she contemplated killing herself. Hefner, she writes, wouldn't allow her to see a therapist. But yet, at the same time, Playboy helped to fund the Equal Rights Amendment, seeking to end distinctions between men and women in terms of divorce, property and employment. Through its non-profit Playboy Foundation, it supported the Kinsey Institute for research into sex, gender and reproduction. It funded rape crisis centres and the clergy consultation service connecting women with abortion services. How the hell do you connect those two things? Hefner himself said, I do support those things, but hey, I'm human. I'm a selfish, jealous creature in real life, but my politics are the opposite to my personal realm. Do you get to say that? Do you get to get away with that, Beck?
I mean, I like to preach all like, oh, goodwill to mankind and all that sort of thing. But then again,
You should
I
call
will
me
steal the microwave, so...
Take that, Funland, or another place wasn't necessary.
Yeah. I know what you're saying, though, actually.
Yeah, like it's that sort of those who are without sin cast the first stone, that kind of thing. Like I don't like that behaviour from him. I don't think it was correct, but I'm glad that some good came from.
Yeah.
But Stephen, if you were dating someone and they were telling you what to wear, when you could come in, what you could do, telling you who to have sex with, what they watch, controlling you to the point where you can't do gigs, can't earn a living, can't see your friends, and then the next day out talking about social rights and equality.
I think you'd get off on that, wouldn't you, Steve?
That's why I threw the bit about not being able to work in there.
I think I've got that little sociopath thing where it's like, if he picks out my outfit, oh, I don't have to pick out my outfit,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. But no, I know obviously it's totally wrong.
Wrong. We're talking evil here. That's why.
I think
That's
it's
why I'm
evil
throwing it in.
privately at the moment and genius publicly.
Which is the worst type of evil, is it not?
Well, I don't know, evil publicly is pretty bad.
So I know we're all laughing. Maybe we're nervous, Simon, because what we're talking about here, and it's so relevant today, it's more relevant now than if I'd recorded this series a year ago. We're talking #MeToo consent here. This guy would have been.
Well, there's the concern.
Surely
Holly
hashtag
Madison's issues of concern. I mean, what is obviously like a degree of virtue signalling. It's relevant in that respect, and it is like, but Holly Madison's story. The question is, did she understand the terms on which she was engaged? If you get to live in a mansion in California on the understanding that you're a play bunny or bunny girl or whatever they were called, don't assume that Heifer is going to leave it up to you to decide whether or not you join in with the orgies. I mean, that's pretty much understood, isn't it?
I don't know, though. We don't know the terms. We don't know the terms.
No, we don't.
We're assuming on his side.
I'm just refusing to assume.
Even if they were let's bear in mind, it's a thought experiment back. Let's say they were the terms. Is that not still what we're talking about today? So if a woman comes through a job interview and I go, these are the terms, take them or leave them, sexual fondling, you get the job, that's still #MeToo.
No, but that is the job. Do you want that deal or not?
Is it not? But given that so many of the playmates were these girls from like backwater Canada who might not have had the best education, who were, I'm not saying they weren't underage, but they were 18, 19, 21, they hadn't exactly been around the block and seen life. Isn't there some sort of manipulation in there, regardless of whether the job is a sexual one, which is slightly unpalatable, if not evil on the part of the older man?
It's like assuming that any woman who goes into the sex industry is, with that argument, you're saying, well, if any woman becomes a prostitute, then that is, she's made that decision, so it's her fault, when there's so many other things at play there, aren't there? Some women go into it, they absolutely love it. Like, there are some women out there who are in the industry who love their jobs and are very outspoken about that.
Obviously, it's on a spectrum, so I would be interested to know to what extent she was, what she was getting into. But
I mean, just to go there with family as well, his attitude to women throughout his life was a bit, I know we already mentioned this, they were more possessions or things to be used or admired, even though his public discourse in the magazine's language was all abortion rights and rape crisis sentences. In his personal life, he picked up and put down his first wife and his kids, no problem. And in fact, one of his quotes was this: "It's much easier to have several girlfriends than a single wife." Well, what do you think of that, Stephen?
He was almost like we have open relationships and everything now, don't we?
No, but he wanted his cake and eat. This point is that I don't have a problem with a man if he's like, I'm single, I can't help it, I like sex, that's what I tell the women in my life.
Yeah.
But what annoys me, gives my lot a bad name, is when you get a man who wants the sort of broken wife living at home and then wants to do that as well.
It's like it's different woman to what situation they think they're going into. Like, if they know.
Yeah. What do you think of that phrase, Stephen, when people go, it's a product of its time. It was different back then. We're not talking about Vikings. It wasn't 1150. You didn't get off your paddle boat, burn a village and seize the women. It's only like 30, 40 years. I'm pretty sure.
Now, there's been huge changes.
There have been huge changes.
Even in the last half an hour, honestly.
I don't know about you guys, but I am fully doing.
But I'm pretty sure some things that feel wrong and hurt us now felt wrong and hurt back then. For example, if the person you'd just given a birth to the babies for was running off banging someone who's 10 years younger than you, I don't think their wife was at home going, hey man, it's 1960, it's not affecting me. She's probably rocking back and forth in silent pain, being a predator. Just now we're confident enough to go, what a bastard, or was he evil?
So far, it's been quite the mix. I feel like I need to know more about it.
Oh, really? It's almost like you're helping me with the format point. Who hasn't opened a HEF envelope yet?
I don't think I've opened the HEF.
Simon?
Yeah, thank you very much. Reused mouthwash.
What?
No, it doesn't say.
Put it back in the bottle.
There's a civil rights advocate.
I'm now going to hit you with the most genius positive thing. You don't understand, and we can never feel how forward-thinking this was in the 1950s, we're talking. White publishing magnate who's rapidly becoming one of the most read magazines by the thinking men of the time goes full, all out, all in on civil rights. He starts publishing black authors. He starts publishing black writers. He does interviews with Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, you name it. He pushes civil rights. In 1959, he helped to organise the Playboy Jazz Festival in Chicago, where black musicians, including Dizzy Gillespie and Cannonball Adderley, performed. Gross receipts for the festival's first day went to the civil rights organisation NAACP. So this isn't just showboating, he's actually behind the scenes doing the philanthropy that came out of it. Later editions of the festival featured black and white musicians performing together at a time with Jim Crow segregation still prevalent in the South. So this is massive. He opened a chain of Playboy clubs in the 60s when Southern franchise owners refused black club members admissions. Hugh bought the clubs back and installed his own more progressive management. This wasn't just a, hey man, look, I've got black friends type tokenism. He was so liberal that he put his neck on the line for civil rights. What does that make you think of the man who told a girl she had to wear lipstick at 9 p.m. and bang his friend while he was? How do you reconcile those two people?
Oh, very, very easily.
Go on,
They all feels like it's exactly part of the same mentality.
What?
But he's not constrained by conventional morality. He decides what he thinks is right and wrong. He goes with what he considers to be natural law, and he sees that these are all just people, and only some sort of accident of history has rendered them a second class.
You could have been talking about women then. He didn't treat women like that.
No, he doesn't treat them as not as second class. He just treats them as like people with whom he has sexual attraction, and he can afford to, and makes the offer to live in the mansion. That's the deal.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Did that surprise you, Stephen, that I've just said he's out there interviewing Martin Luther King, putting on a jazz, giving the profits to...
Yeah, because, let me tell you, when I first came into that, like I say, he was a funny old granddad, and then we hit the Holly Madison thing, and I was like, oh my god, I hate you, and now I like him again. Like, you're blowing my mind here, because obviously I agree with what he's done, like Late in the Black, but then I don't agree with him making what he's done to the women, some of the women.
Yeah.
And so I'm so torn right now. You're blowing my mind more than I have been in a long time.
So that he controlled every aspect of the magazine. He had, in fact, he developed an amphetamine problem at one stage, staying up all night, writing complete control freak, deciding how it looked, making sure he had posh, literary elite writers in. Is this thing with the civil rights just another extension of the man's narcissism, where he wants everyone to look at him and think, God, not only is he a sex god, but he's also really kind to people who don't have much? Are we being fooled by the massive edifice of what was essentially just a narcissist with a boner?
No, I think Simon had a good point where he went, this is what I think is right, and I'm in the position where I can make a difference. I do believe in that. I think it's weird that a podcast full of white people is commenting on it.
I know.
So it's a hard one.
So when you look at some of the magazines that starting with Penthouse, which was like, what are you doing here? Let's just show everything, virtually gynecological. You look back at Playboy and it's almost like they sort of got it right. It was eroticism rather than pornography. If you look at it now...
Isolation. Burlesque versus stripping.
Indeed. You think, Simon?
Well, I mean, yeah, but they were all put out by the internet, weren't they? It was the internet for all of it. Yeah,
that only finishes me off.
Finishes me off. Exactly.
I thought that was me.
Oh, was it? I wonder who it was. I didn't think it was a very convincing person typing that. I'm a red-headed man in Manchester. Please send another shot from a closer angle. Why does your voice sound like Stephen Bailey? It's not. It's Stephanie. Well, I think we've definitely run our course here. It's light after the racial episode. I feel like we needed a bit of that.
Very heavy around Hollywood.
It did. So it should as well. So, yes, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to vote on whether Hugh Hefner was evil or genius. You don't get to act all Radio 4 and pretend there is ambiguity and nuance. No. So, I'm going to start, I think... Well, as soon as Stephen Bailey saying, not me, and waving, I'm going to start with Stephen Bailey.
Oh, no.
Listen, you don't get to have consent when we're talking about Hugh Hefner.
You knew what you were signing up for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was the deal when you walked in.
Never wear that lipstick again.
Oh, crap.
Just weigh it up. We've got the civil rights, the sort of proto-feminist behaviour, and then underneath it, the leering, over-sexualised, controlling. Well, it's just normal now to look at women in that way. Is he the person that started it?
From that point of view, I think I'm going to go with evil. Oh no, I'll go with genius.
No, you go.
Okay, I'll go with evil.
You go.
Evil.
And you do Stephen, no one else.
Okay, I've gone with evil because I don't like how he's treated the women.
Bailey has gone evil. Simon, I'm going to come to you next. I'm interested to know what you would think.
Yeah, I'm
Brilliant points
happy.
about the liberal libertarian.
I'm quite happy to overlook a few little moral scruples here and there. Yeah, widely speaking, genius has bestowed great and overwhelmingly positive social change on the world, and I feel sorry for Madison. She should take better advice.
So it's one or this one. I want opinions on this show. I want proper opinions. Beck, that leaves you to decide whether you happen to know as evil or genius, because it's 1-1.
Well, as we all know, geniuses love power, and I'm enjoying this power thoroughly. So I'm going to go evil. Put him in the box.
And the primary reason for putting him evil?
Because I think the world would be fine without him.
Okay, so next one evil. That means we have voted evil for Hugh Hefner. That's it. That brings us to a close of another Evil Genius. Thank you very much to my panel. If you've liked what you heard, please click subscribe. Give us a 5-star review if you've loved it. Thanks for listening. Join us again for Evil Genius. Goodbye.
What's up, I'm Stadia.
And I'm Monty.
We are interrupting your regular listening to tell you about the baddest new podcast.
No country for young women.
We're going to school you in how to best navigate the white man's world when you're Asian or black.
I think we missed that lesson at school, to be honest, so we don't really know how to navigate ourselves, but we're going to try and give it a good crack.
That's No Country for Young Women.
Subscribe now, wherever you found this podcast.
Sky Showtime 31st premiere of Jurassic World 4. Premiumshistorien om eksklusive serier, Sylvester Stallones tolser og et anmelderros til Yellow Jackets. Kun på Sky Showtime. Stream for kun 69 kroner om måneden.
This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
Sky Showtime giver dig de største premiere for 100 om måneden.
This is the BBC.
Hello, this is Evil Genius, where I make a panel decide if someone's achievements outweigh their git side. From Einstein to John Lennon, in fact, we play this game all the time, all of us. For example, this morning I ignored an old lady crossing the road, but I quickly thought up a pun based on walking sticks as I laughed and passed him passively by. That's all you need to decide, evil or genius. Also, most important... Sorry, it's my tablet device. Wait, I'm going to read it off my phone. Actually, no, I'm going to do it off my laptop. Actually, can we beam the script to my Wi-Fi television device? Just kidding. There's no script. That's right. Today's subject is Steve Jobs. The panel helping me run a moral software update that they don't even want today is my former lover and owner of my Russet's Target hair colour. It's comedian and telestar Stephen Bailey.
Oh, hi.
When he said former lover, we're like,
Which one is it?
A comedian who has that rare thing amongst our kind, an actual physical talent. She's a puppeteer and craftsperson as well as jester. It's Beth Hill. And a comedian so regal and commanding on stage that recently he has even grown an Edward VII's beard. It's Simon Evans.
Annoyingly shaved it off in the 2 days since I last saw you.
I know, well. Simon, something evil. What are you good at?
Well, I was going to say, I've got this thing I can do with my tongue, which I thought would be the perfect thing to demonstrate.
Let's have the genius thing. So for those I'm looking at a tri-folded tongue.
Tri-folded tongue, and it's very rare. It correlates roughly with genius in terms of the statistical, likelihood of it in the population.
I thought it looked like Predator had licked a lemon. Stephen, anything evil or genius for us?
I'm really good at breaking up with people.
That is pure evil.
Is it genius?
Well, that's what we
don't want to go out with them.
Fantastic.
good point.
Beck?
I'm really good at coming up with recipes from things left in the house.
Fantastic.
Yeah, like Ketchup on bread? What is that? David's children? Yeah, delicious.
Yeah, next door's package from Amazon.
I like how that's the third, like, the most evil thing. Yeah. Not the children. The idea of eating
somebody else's food deliveries. That's really...
So, right, we got the measure of you guys. So today's subject is Steve Jobs, the Apple genius or evil person. That's what we're here to decide. Just real quick point before I find out what you guys already think of him. He was born in San Francisco in 1955 and he was adopted. It may be relevant, it may not. So he grew up in Silicon Valley. He was a non-conformist from an early age. His parents made loads of sacrifices, sent him to posh schools.
Can I just interrupt you? Sorry, it wasn't Silicon Valley then. That was partly his doing.
What is now known as Silicon Valley.
Okay, yeah. Just like the valley.
We are in the presence of a master here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to get away with nothing today. That's exactly how I like it, Simon.
You could tell me anything, I would believe it.
We agreed not to speak about last night. So they spent all this money, they sent him to this posh uni, he didn't attend the classes, he did the typical hippie thing, all round barefoot, spent his time love making, drug taking and dropped out, even though his dad, an engineer, relatively humble man, made loads of sacrifices. He travelled to India, he took up Zen Buddhism, bumped into Steve Wozniak, they were both working at HP at the time, and the rest is history. They formed Apple. In 1985 he was fired from Apple, and then started another company called Next, which was eventually bought by Apple. He then went back when Apple was 6 weeks from bankruptcy and made it the most powerful and most lucrative company in the world before dying of pancreatic cancer in 2011 at age just 56 because he didn't need treatment, he treated himself. He's a homeopathic mind master and thought he could beat it with his own willpower. These are all traits I'm throwing in there because I think they might end up being relevant. So guys, I'm guessing each one of you nursing Apple devices. Well, except for Simon and me, he might have a fax machine.
He's got a pencil case. I think there's a pencil case.
Windows 3.1 as it happens, in defiance. Yeah, I have got a laptop. Yeah, I don't run an Apple phone. I find them annoying phones. I don't know why. I don't like the operating system. I don't like the shape and size and dimensions of them. I have a large screen Samsung phone, but
Hello, you're through to Pegasus Lifestyle Management. How can I help?
Jonathan Ives. If he has any credit...
Call again. Goodbye.
Jonathan Ives, that's arguably. If there's genius in hiring, then he's probably...
We'll come on to that. In a moment, I'm going to distribute envelopes amongst you. We'll open the envelopes periodically to let off factoids and maybe treading on the toes.
I may have anticipated.
I do want to evaluate that genius.
I think with Steve and I could just go.
Yeah.
I mean, Simon's got this.
This is like the best school class I've ever had. I'm learning so much from you, Simon. Keep going.
What Steve Jobs devices do you have in your life?
I just have the iPhone, which I really thank Steve Jobs for, but I have for a computer like a proper Windows HP thing because I can't understand the Apple Mac. I don't really understand it.
And do you know anything about Steve Jobs? You got any opinions, Beck?
No, none. I don't know anything Apple either.
I didn't know if there might be an Aussie version, because sometimes you go to Australia and there's something that's like ours. Or something just like it. No, my favourite.
Like banana or something.
My favourite Australian thing ever is Burger King is called Hungry Jack's there.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
Yeah.
Do you know why? Because Burger King was like, right, we're coming over with Burger King, and there was one guy who owned a Burger King shack in an Australian city, and they was like, well, obviously we want the name. Here's how much money do you want? He went, I don't want any money. I'm the Burger King in Australia. They'll never take my name. I am the Burger King, and I always will be. So they're Hungry Jacks there. Fantastic.
Yeah.
We'll open our first envelope.
Okay.
What you got in there?
Simon, I think you'll already know this. Change the world.
Steve Jobs launched a series of products over 3 decades that transformed whole industries. It started with products I've never heard of, to be honest, and many of us won't. The Apple II and Lisa. And then, of course, the Macintosh, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad. Slam dunk genius. Let's switch off the crossfader. Over.
I mean, in the early days, it was Steve Wozniak was the genius in terms of, the technology and the visionary nature of what a computer could do and what it could be. I mean, people who owned the Apple II, they loved it, these guys who all lived in California in the 70s and knew that they were going to change the world. But if you put a gun to their head and asked them to explain why and how exactly, they didn't really know. They just sensed the potential of the thing. The graphic user interface which changed everything, which is the mouse and the click and the cursor which moves around, and the fact that now when you use when you type a document, it looks as if it's appearing on a white sheet of paper rather than just that kind of 1970s screen with green, flickering,
Yeah.
That was invented by Xerox. Xerox came and they had a thing called PARC, the Palo Alto Research Center, which was like a hive of geniuses in the early 70s. Bill Gates famously said, just because you got in there first and nicked the telly doesn't mean I can't go in and nick the hi-fi. They were all nicking it from each other. He wasn't like this creative genius. What he was an industrialist. He was more like a Henry Ford than a Thomas Edison, really.
Do you think so? He did what I thought no one could do. He designed a computer that when you took it out of the box, my mum could use it.
Yeah. All of the interesting though that Beck said, in fact both these guys, Stephen as well, has said, I don't understand it. They perceive it as being something that's beyond them, whereas in reality, as you say, the genius is supposed to be, but it's incredibly simple.
Was that not the genius, Steve? That all of these things, that some might be true. Wozniak probably did understand the technical side of it. Maybe others. The mouse was invented about 30 years before Steve Jobs built it into the Apple. But he had a vision, a Zen guarded vision based on all the mushrooms he took in India about simplifying things. So when you want to open it, there's one button and you press it, and he goes, "I ready to serve you, master." That was the genius. He might not have been the one who made it.
How is this different to normal computers, though?
Well,
when you turn on a normal PC and it says, where do you want to go today?
Find a 60-year-old, 70-year-old who's never used a computer and take a regular PC around and try and get them to use it. I reckon you'll last 2 days before you club their head in with a hammer. How can you not understand what that is?
Do you remember a band called the Tubes? I think it was the Tubes.
No.
I
know my answer.
It was like that. It was named after a science fiction, like a concept that we are just evolved tubes. You put food in one end and it comes out the other end, and that's all we are. So it was like it was that.
Lovely. I'd like to go out for dinner with them.
They had a really sort of dystopian album cover in the late 70s. It was a baby in a pushchair or pram or something, and it had like a white TV unit sort of built into the pram, and it was already absorbing all the commercial messaging. It was like satire on American TV, but it looked exactly like the first Apple product. I don't think they've ever been credited with it, but it's this perfectly smooth, it's just a vision of a hellish future, isn't it, Apple product? Like those fat man babies.
You mean like how?
In Wally.
Costa del Sol.
Yeah, Costa del, I don't go there. A single word for that.
So Simon, I put across this utopian vision of a device that's an extension of ourselves, designed with Zen-like simplicity so that even someone in the 70s could use it for the first time. Simon's quite correctly riposted with, yes, but they're highly addictive for that very reason. If something becomes part of you, it's almost like a drug.
I think there is something with the Apple though, and I think because I was in my school, it was all like HP or whatever, like a normal PC.
It was Northern, was it?
Yeah, it was very honestly, we didn't get computers until very late either. And so then when it went to the Apple, I don't know how to use people's Apple Mac, and then it took me ages to get the iPhone because I was scared to leave the BlackBerry.
What about the iPod?
I won an iPod when they first came out, which was so exciting because I went from carrying around a VHS-sized Walkman to school, and then the next day had
or a CD one.
Tape, proper Walkman, not a Discman. Yeah. And I completely skipped the Discman and went into the white
Did you never have the mini disc players?
Oh, never went in it. Oh yeah, those popular items.
Let me just throw a word into this podcast recording. Podcast. I don't need to get meta on your asses, but we wouldn't be sitting here evaluating Steve Jobs' genius if he hadn't invented the iPod and everything that flowed from it. Just to get you an idea of how much of a genius, I'm still keeping the inverted commas so Simon's very close to the reach. How much of a genius he just was to shrink this thing down. Yes, okay, Simon, before you say it, there were other MP3 players, it had been done. But no one had shrunk it down to this object you could hold in your hand, so small that in fact one of the meetings just before they released it, one of the last prototypes, Steve was like, still too big. And everyone, the designers were crying because it's quite expensive to work. And he said, I want it smaller. No, it can't be made any smaller. So he took their only working prototype, threw it in the fish tank in the office, and when the bubbles came out, he went, see, air, shrink it.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's when you need it. Do you have an air horn sound effect on that?
Yeah, so it was about this refinement and design. I mean,
can I just say, I don't dispute the if you want to call it the genius of Apple as a product of and as a design innovation. It's just what was the nature of Jobs' genius, and but in the way that anecdote you just told, that kind of is the genius. That's the ability to bully people without them actually leaving, to take people that enable them to endure the psychological pain that you regard as being a necessary part of your management.
We may have
Abusers
drifted
are
to
geniuses, aren't they? Yeah.
another area shortly. We'll leave the bullying and control freakery for just a few minutes. I promise we're going to explore it properly.
I heard he threw a baby into the sea and he said, air bubbles, air bubbles. I'm going to streamline childbirth.
I might be making this very simplistic, but I really like the colours of the the iPod. I really got like chuffies over that. If I can get the blue one, this is going to be amazing.
I don't know if you've done it on purpose, but you have touched on the bit that took Apple from 6 weeks before bankruptcy, when Steve Jobs returned, like a cheeky Lazarus from the cave. I'm quite glad. He came back in, walked into the office that was just working on the next Macintosh and went, let's make a new colour. And brought out these desktops that had coloured backs, branding genius. Here we are, 20, 25 years later, most valuable company on earth. What you've just said there,
Am I the genius?
what gives you the chuffy pants,
Yeah.
was the catalyst that drove them. So that's interesting. So you've got like that shows you've got an emotional connection to the devices.
But I felt like it was just like, oh, this is really cheesy, isn't it? But I was like, oh, it represents like who you are.
No, it's not cheesy. It's bang on.
Yeah,
You're the most like Steve Jobs of anyone in the room right now.
I don't think that's true for a minute. I thought you were Steve Jobs with all that knowledge about cursors.
It's not, they were like named after fruit as well, weren't they? They weren't just called colours. They were like, there was a blueberry one or something. Well, that looks like you could lick
even the name of the product there. Like when you go to use something, he didn't call himself Alpha Engineering. You think what was out there at the time? Atari, Commodore, IBM with its monolithic Stanley Kubrick stone logo. Very technical, male, testosterone, geeky, I love prime numbers type companies. And then Steve comes on, what if we are just held an Apple?
Yeah.
Isn't there something for
but didn't Apple also lead to the downfall of humanity in the Bible?
Yes, it did.
There's a number of theories about where the apple comes from, isn't there? One of them was Alan Turing left an apple with a bite out of it when he committed suicide by his bedside. And it was, for many years they thought it was a reference. Alan Turing wasn't famous at that time, of course, but he was like the forefather of computing technology. And then other people said, no, it's Newton's technology.
And when the computer fell on Newton's head and he was like, oh, that was heavy.
It's obvious.
It was simplicity, it was Zen, and then someone said to me, he worked in an orchard for 6 months when he was 18. I bet you that's why he picked that up. So I think that we've evaluated the product itself, the creative vision, the branding. It's time to move on to envelope number 2. I'll give you the honour.
Thank you very much.
Now this comes up a lot in all of our geniuses, male or female. What I'm starting to mainly male, I would have thought. Incredibly sexist what you just said. People of rights and will complain. No, I'm starting to wonder if there is a continuum with parenthood at one end and genius at the other. And Steve Jobs, I'm afraid, was no exception. At the age of 23, Steve got his on-off girlfriend, Pedersen, pregnant. They'd been together a fairly long time. They were cohabiting. It was a proper relationship. He absolutely flipped when he found out she was pregnant. In fact, he more or less told her to move out that day. He would not acknowledge it. Now, this is where we start to nudge a little bit into control freak territory, which I want to explore later. So try and get if you can. But he would not acknowledge this baby was his. He could not handle that he'd made a mistake. Not mine, not mine, not mine. She pushed for a paternity test. When it came back at that time, he could only establish 95% accuracy, so he did the maths. 5% of the American public at the time was well into the millions, so he said it's not conclusively my baby. Wow. He still paid the paternity and signed the document, but verbally would not. And he paid it very low. It was like the equity minimum, wasn't it? And a year after Lisa was born, the California courts ordered him to pay the child support, even though he denied it. And at the time, Pedersen and Lisa were living on welfare, or benefits, as we'd say.
I just want to let any listeners who are fans of my comedy know that I am not going to have children, so they never have to worry about me losing my genius.
So that's how good you are.
Really nice that there's something quite genius than him denying it.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, my dad does that all the time. I stuff around. Normally got no money.
Stephen, are you single right now? You know.
Well,
So, what do you think if I said to you, there are 2 paths? One, you can become the next stadium-filling stand-up.
Yeah.
You're going to write a genius show, Perrier Award on the shelf, or you can be the best dad that ever walked the planet and have a loving marriage.
Oh no!
And you can only walk one path, because I'm starting to think, is that the case? I'm not saying none of us around this table can't be quite good and have children, but to be a single-mindedly Zen master, brilliant at one thing, and be a good parent, I'm not sure it's even possible.
I pick the stand up, honest to God. I don't want to make a baby. I don't want to be involved in that process. I don't want to be like up the back. I saw a picture of one yesterday my friend put on Facebook, and it was like live, life, love, and the baby had like pooped. It was like diarrhea all up his back. And I was like, that's just not for me. I don't know how you heterosexuals do it.
In that instance, like me as well, like you're going, oh, in one side I'm going to choose not to have kids. Like, I'm going to choose not to have kids. But like if I was in a position where suddenly there was a baby and I had to look after it, I think, it's not like I'd have to be the best mum in the world, but like, I don't know, it's just, part of me goes, well mate, you dug your grave, like why are you, she's got to sacrifice her life to be a mum now, and he's made that decision that she doesn't, like, what if she was more of a genius than Steve Jobs? What if she'd gone on way, way further if he'd been like a stay-at-home dad and looked after his kid?
But is it not the coldness though of denying the paternity and using maths to say, oh well, there's 5% still not me? I mean, that is another level of coldness, isn't it? That's the walking back to look at the body and laughing level of coldness.
That's next level, actually.
Yeah, with the
like pushing up the glass.
Yeah, the spec pushing.
Thank you, 5. There's a significant margin of error here.
Is it evil? Is that evil, Stephen, to acknowledge not acknowledge the failure, or is he just a legend? Come on. Yeah, this is the guy that went on to create things we cannot live without.
So we're saying if you raise that kid, we might actually still have conversations face to face.
How awful would that be?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't want to speak to anyone's face.
I think there's another option here. I think he could have not been a dick and been like, you're right, this is my baby, but I don't want to be a part of its life. Here's heaps of money.
Correct.
Going like, he could have done that, but instead he was like, oh, it's probably not even my kid. Like, that's him trying to get out of being called a bad dad, because he's like, yeah, but I'm not a dad.
And I probably should point out he eventually did do that, but only once Apple had fired him, when he get that interim when he was out in the wilderness before he came back as the saviour. Funnily enough, when he was in his garden digging up his begonias and had a bit of time on his hand, he suddenly wanted to connect with his daughter.
The extraordinary thing I found was it was while he was with Next, he got involved with Pixar, right?
Yes, correct.
You know, it was part of the establishment of Pixar, who made their name with like extraordinary demonstrations of empathy with the childhood imagination and so on.
And usually a dad.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, what is it? Although their first one was Toy Story, right, in which the father is not only absent but unexplainably absent.
Yeah.
It's basically a boy,
and the neighbour is a potato.
Yeah.
But people who work with him described him as having what's called reality distortion. When he walked in a room, he was wearing, metaphorically, what now exists, glasses where he could put it on and see what that could be, who you could be, what he could be. And he lived his life as though that thing existed until it did. So someone said to him, for example, you cannot make the fan in a computer silent. It cannot be done. All we can do is shrink it. He went, we'll do it. It does exist. You will. A year later, I've got my open in front of me now, running silently.
Yeah. I've got silent fans as well.
He applied that to his role as a father. You do not exist. You are not my child.
Yeah.
I never made this mistake. He could not take those reality distorting glasses.
It's like Shaggy, right? I didn't do it.
It wasn't me.
Yeah.
Rewrote it into British English. I didn't do it. I think you'll find I'm exculpated. I didn't do it.
Don't you find this interesting, right? So for something that he wasn't very good, like being like a father and making his own child happy, his iPods and iPhones and Pixar have made me really happy and other children. So it's like he's been a good father to them.
Although I could throw a side point in there.
Don't do it and ruin it.
Guess what Steve Jobs did not allow his children to have? An iPad.
Oh yeah, I did read about that.
Yeah.
Oh.
So when I go on holiday now, me and Lindsay are at breakfast, me and my daughter, we are in the tiny minority of families that doesn't have a toddler with an iPad up to the face whilst they eat their food.
Sitting there reading some George Eliot wish list.
We're doing the hard work of amusing her with toys, and obviously I'll say something to her in Latin, she'll bring it back to me in Greek. But once we say
separating thumb trick.
Remember what happened to Agamemnon? Okay, well, I think we've evaluated his paternal skills there. Moving on to the final revelation.
Yeah. Oh.
Beck, Hill, you would like
Very
to
exciting.
let us know what's in the envelope of power.
Ooh, it says control freak.
Yeah, now this obviously has coloured everything we've been talking about so far, but let's really drill down into it. It's an Apple-branded device. If you use the iDrill... No, you're putting up a shelf to do a selfie. Whoops! That looks so hot we're not working.
That would be so good for my grinder, actually. I would look so good.
Yeah, I'm screwing right now.
Yeah. You're on fire. Right, there are many accounts of him that he's cool. One of Apple's early presidents, Mike Scott, assigned employee badge numbers. Mike Wozniak got number 1. Steve Jobs initially, it was badge 2. And then they went down through the ranks like that. Scott says that Jobs threw a tantrum because he got badge number 2 and was crying in his office because they gave Wozniak badge 1 and badge 2. Finally, there was a solution that Wozniak could keep his badge number 1, Steve Jobs had badge 0. Wow. He's a genius, remember, right? He cried because he wasn't number 1. There are accounts of him passing off other people's ideas to his own. We've already touched on this. Apple chief designer Johnny Ive, Simon, said he will go through the process of looking at my ideas and then say, that's no good, that's not very good, I like that one. And later, I'll be sitting there in the audience, he'll be talking about it as if it was his idea. He designed computers and phones so that no one could get inside. Have you ever tried to repair your own Apple device using special screwdrivers? You use a little illegal corner shop with the guy that does it out the back. He said if you want to allow your products to be open to other hardware or software, you've given up your vision. On every level, father of the products for how he worked in the office, the man was a control freak with an explosive temper and a lack of empathy. What do you think of that, Beck?
I would have gone, rather than going 0, because I don't think that's any better, labeling yourself as a 0.
0 is a 1 though, binary thing, isn't it? Of course, that might
So
have
0
been
is no, isn't it? Is it 0 a closed and 1 is an open?
There are nerds openly masturbating now. Listen, some of them might be on public transport, please. The other thing we have to talk about is Steve Jobs' philanthropy, or lack of. For a man that thought he saw the Zen purity and balance of the world, he was notoriously stingy when it came to helping out others. Using that casts another shadow in relation to paternity and everything else, Beck?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny how anyone who's like, oh yes, the universe is so balanced, normally the balance is very heavily in their favour.
Steve?
No, I agree with Beck on this one. I feel like it is a bit like, it's like when vegans take Sundays off so they can have a roast. Like, you're not a vegan anymore, and that's kind of
I couldn't imagine Steve just taking a Sunday off that wasn't part of the how do you make of this confusing lack of philanthropy?
The philanthropy thing is really interesting because I think it's a huge issue at the moment in the world generally, and especially in like the big tech guys in America. They're using philanthropy as a cover for being nefarious, evil villains. Jobs presumably felt his conscience was clean and he didn't need to, buy God off with this kind of random charitable donations.
You know why? God does exist. He will use an iPad. Let's face it. This is what we got coming in today.
Being God.
No, the iPad.
I think also possibly the fact that, as you say, he rescued Apple. He went in there, didn't he? It was on the verge of bankruptcy, over £1 billion, $1 million worth of losses.
It was
he turned it around,
folding.
And I think possibly when you felt, the chill wind of death, corporate death on the back of your neck like that, maybe you don't feel quite as well disposed towards just chucking some up widows and orphans.
His reality distortion, he even extended to the point where he thought he could distort death just by staring it in the face and saying, you are not that, you are this. That's how far he took the idea of reality distortion. But only it were true.
Do you think that's a man thing though? Like, my dad had a heart attack like 2 years ago and we couldn't get him to go to the hospital. Like, he was like, you go in, you don't come out. You don't go in, you're just going to die.
Nonsense, it's last night's been delusive.
Yeah, and he was like, as if a little bit of death is going to stop me. I was like, no, Jack, you're going to go in the car.
Okay, so before we vote, just reflect. Can you only achieve in the ways Jobs achieved? By being single-minded and passionate. Tim Cook, current Apple CEO, said this. What I learned about Steve was that people mistook some of his comments as ranting or negativism, but it was really just the way he showed passion. I mean, that's classic male behaviour. I just lash out sometimes, princess. I'm so passionate, I'll punch the hole with the connecting wall. Steve Jobs, your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. That's what Steve Jobs said. I mean, that could be a stand-up comedian who you respect talking. Guys, it's time to vote. It's going to be tricky with this one. I don't want to, it's not more complicated than that. There aren't nuances. The guy's either going in the evil box or the genius box. There's 3 votes, and I don't care whether it's unanimous or not. Simon?
Well, I was hovering until the air bubbles in the aquarium. That's genius. I'm happy with that story. He was an industrialist more than a visionary, I think, but I'll give him a genius in that category.
Second, we'll go to Beck Hill for your vote.
I'm going to go evil because from what I've learned during this session is that most of the things that I thought that he was a genius for weren't his ideas, and I think they would have happened anyway. I think the only redeeming feature he seemed to have from this chat, is my caveat, was that he knew who to invest in, even by taking massive risks. That's amazing.
And it wasn't his own children.
Yeah, that's true. But Pixar, I'm happy with that. But it's not enough. So I've been swayed to evil.
So that just leaves Stephen's vote.
I'm going to go with genius, and I also think it was genius that Ashton Kutcher played in the film.
Well, that's it. It's 2-3. Steve Jobs gets genius. He goes into the Genius Hall of Fame, the creator of tablets, iPhones, MP3 players that we all nurse and love. He's a genius, even though he made us technology-addicted, ruling freaks. As pressed in Simon's obscure album cover that none of us have heard of. He goes into the genius. If you've liked what you've heard, please subscribe. Leave us a review, leave a 5-star review. If you haven't liked what you've heard, I'm Nick Grimshaw. Please go to my Twitter and let me know what you think of me. Thanks very much for listening. Goodbye!
What's up, I'm Sadia.
And I'm Monty.
We are interrupting your regular listening to tell you about the baddest new podcast
in the country for young women.
We're going to school you in how to best navigate the white man's world when you're Asian or black.
I think we missed that lesson at school, to be honest, so we don't really know how to navigate ourselves, but we're going to try and give it a good crack.
That's No Country for Young Women.
Subscribe now, wherever you found this podcast.
介紹探求嗰啲 just players，我哋出嚟是過路出現，呢次做一兩套，excuse，哎呀，ps4pro我en4cer666，咁個介紹晒，主要係嗰啲一出講啦喎。
This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
介紹探求嗰啲 just players，但佢哋一出講啦喎。
This is the BBC.
Hello, this is Evil Genius, a BBC podcast where we grab legendary people from the past and ask, were they actually total scumbags? Worship figures will turn out to be rogues. Saints sometimes bang out of order. Maybe there's lovely stuff about a person who thought was awful. Can you still idolise someone once they get a look at their grubby stains? Were they more evil or genius? That's what we're going to be deciding today, and I have an awesome panel to help me along. I've got Grania Maguire, welcome. Touring stand-up, TV, radio, switch it on, you'll find her. Omar Hamdi supported me on tour. Sorry, not allowed to say that anymore, that's an oppressive term. He was a stage co-worker on my gender-neutral tour.
In a safe space known as the stage.
You'll see him cropping up on the BBC, BBC Wales, all over the place. And of course, Sindhu V, stand-up comedian, TV, radio. You'll hear her on Radio 4, all over the place. Guys, give me something evil or genius about yourselves. Anything you're genius at. You make a pavlova. Are you good at a souffle?
I make extraordinary banana bread. Extraordinary. I mean, it's like
because banana bread can be so soggy.
No, but it's not. It is full of bananas, and it's just the best banana bread you've ever eaten. So I don't make banana bread. I make the best banana bread anyone's ever eaten.
That's your genius. Of course, your evil is you once covered over a murder, so that's for me.
Using bananas?
Yeah, of course. Buried in banana bread.
Officer, he slipped on the peel. Would you like some banana bread?
That's the death every comedian would choose. Omar, anything evil or genius you can
My genius is I've realised that when you get a takeaway coffee cup and it spills on you sometimes it spills if the fold in the cup is facing you. So the trick is to always make the fold in the cup face away from you, and then you will never get that little leak through the lid.
Actual genius.
Actual genius. I went to a good university, ladies and gentlemen.
Grania?
My evil genius was I once accidentally went on a comedy course in Italy for 3 months. When I got there, I thought it was going to be like physical comedy like Charlie Chaplin, but it turned out it was Commedia dell'arte, which is like medieval Benny Hill. Anyway, I was stuck there for 3 months.
Please don't enjoy that for a second. Medieval art was medieval Benny Hill.
But then I wasn't enjoying it, and then I realised I was the only person on the course from like a British or an Irish background. So instead of like vulnerable and experimenting, whenever I went on stage, I just copied like Blackadder jokes, absolutely fabulous jokes, fast show sketches. By the end of the 3 months, they thought I was an absolute genius.
And that is evil. Very much what the show's about. Okay, listeners, today we are talking about Margaret Thatcher. My poor panel had a week to worry about this one. It's a slightly different evil genius today. We're coming at it from the short perspective. We will be opening Thatcher envelopes at various stages, so you'll be asked to open some Thatcher curveballs in a while. But first of all, let's just give the top line. We probably all know it's almost boring to talk about Thatcher, so we have to be careful today, guys. No stupid 1990s well-rehearsed debates, but the long and short of the private comments of this, she was born above a shop in Grantham, Lincolnshire. Not frequently voted the most boring town in the United Kingdom. Could be relevant because she comes from a boring place. She just wants to be more interesting. She studied chemistry at Oxford. She also helped invent the Misty Whipping ice cream. It is connected to her hatred of milk that she developed a powdered dairy product. She joined the Conservative Party, became Britain's first female Prime Minister in 1979, but Britain's longest-serving Prime Minister by the time she resigned in 1990. And in the intervening years, decimated mining communities, stole milk from the children, privatised everything and divided the country down the middle into free market enthusiasts wearing red braces and basically rig from the young ones. So, what do you irritating lefties make of Margaret Thatcher?
I'm not a lefty. I'm completely beyond party politics.
Come on then, Omar. I want to hear you be. What your
Here's my thing, right? Is I'm Welsh, so I'm like I've been reared to say that Thatcher is evil, and I've never really questioned why. So this is a bit of a learning thing for me. What I would say is, at least she stood for something, and we knew what she stood for, and she told us what she stood for.
Don't make me fail Godwin's law this early in the broadcast. If you don't know, Godwin's rule is that as soon as you invoke the Nazis, you've lost the debate.
Oh,
but
okay.
I think we can safely agree that Hitler stood for something. But continue. I'm sorry to break Godwin so early. It was necessary.
But the thing is, she won elections. That's the difference between her and Hitler. Or did Hitler win elections?
You know what? I'm just going to say he won that one in 36.
We finally found the difference between Thatcher and Hitler, ladies and gentlemen.
So, go on.
She kept winning elections. And
stood for something. She was victorious.
Yeah. And like, I would like the people who say that she is evil, who I respect, down the line, had a huge effect on people where I'm from. Cool, I've just done a show about this and interviewed those people and performed there, and I've just seen like sort of the faded grandeur of the whole town. That's so interesting.
Tell us more about that. So you've been interviewing places mining.
Yeah, so the show was called The Miners Who Made Us, and it was really interesting. So my challenge was to go into an abandoned, a mining town that has sort of the faded grandeur. All of these tiny mining towns in South Wales have these amazing venues. I'm talking like flashier than the Hammersmith Apollo. Really, really, really nice venues. And you go in there and it's like, okay, so when was the last time, the miners themselves put something on? Obviously the whole communities have just been, literally work has been replaced by the highest antidepressant prescription rate in the EU, in parts of South Wales. So I'm totally aware of the destruction that happens when something is removed and no one thinks, what are these people going to do now? So definitely on the second part of that, of not thinking, what will the people do now, that I understand that she shouldn't have, she should have thought that through a little bit more. But also, I think it's a bit weird that leftists...
It's like Iraq, really. They went in, no backup plan.
But here's the thing, right? Leftists hate Thatcher for shutting down...
But maybe they could have
actually really good. I'm just totally. I'll fess up now. I'm a Green.
She was a member of Greenpeace. That's why she shut down.
I'm a Green. I voted Green last election. I'm a Green. I don't like turn up and like march stuff.
Really?
But I'm a Green Party member. I'm a Green Party member.
Wow.
Bit of a bromance going on with Carol.
I don't think we can be friends anymore, Russell.
But what you've just said is really profound because
no one's ever said that to me before.
Because your instinct is towards keeping those industries alive for the workers, but at the same time you've got the lefty impulses of
yeah.
But then it's not like she then went into the communities and was like, let's build Prius factories. That would be
Mr.
the next
Toyota
step.
was like, excuse me, I've got a problem with you using this word.
It's exactly like war in Iraq. She just went in, destroyed everything, and was like, oh, let's look at that, bye.
That's just the war in Iraq.
I'm using it as an analogy.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
I don't know. I
think the only person around the table who could probably be more passionate about Thatcher's legacy is probably someone from Ireland, maybe. We'll find out in a minute. But so, what's her PR like in Ireland?
Genuinely, one of my, when I was about, God, what age was I? Maybe about 6. My first ever turn or little bit that I used to do was a Margaret Thatcher impression. I used to go, Charlie Hockey. That was my Margaret Thatcher impression.
It's still good.
Very good. But what I will say, plus side about Margaret Thatcher, I will give her a due.
I've never heard this in your accent, so I can't wait for the end of this sentence.
So, there's a big cat cliche in comedy of this sort of theme of imagine if women were in power. The world would be better if women were in power because, you'd just be sliding off each other's clothes the whole time. And I always feel when I hear that, do they not remember Margaret Thatcher?
Yeah.
She really established the idea that women, given enough power, can be just as awful as men are. And I think,
and we're going to come on to that subject specifically later on. But yeah, brilliant. And just initial thought. We're still at initial thoughts, if you can believe that.
I'll tell you my initial thought. When I first came to this country with my mother, and it was a couple of years before Thatcher.
Right.
And I came from India. And in India, we didn't have running hot and cold water all day. There were times when the water would come on. And so I was not coming from a very sort of snazzy background. And I got here and we went to live in someone's house we were visiting. And I thought, what hell is this? This was pre-Thatcher. This is when you guys had Labour. I was like, what hell is this? It's constantly cold. It was just, and everywhere it was just sad. Everyone was sad. I was little and I left and I thought, oh, England's very sad. When I grew up, I went to America. As it happened, I came back again after Thatcher, and it was great. There was power showers, there was hot and cold water all the time, there was radiators, and I was like, woo, Margaret Thatcher.
You've heard it here. Thatcherism produced the power shower.
There you go.
I think
it's all about power.
There you go. Before for Thatcher, the shower just dribbled out, but afterwards it really came out in a privatised jet.
Exactly. Because each of those waters were independent.
Yeah.
They were going forward by themselves.
Yeah.
Right, so it's time to open the first envelope, I think. Who has the first envelope? Fact bomb to let off.
Right,
Omar Hamdi.
here we are. Wow. I didn't expect this at all, given my earlier joke about Priuses. Green champion.
Now this
Thatcher was a green person.
was one of the things about Thatcher which shocked me into my recycled material seat when I was reading about
People
it.
in Brighton are actually jumping out of their windows in disgust.
I know. For some, Margaret Thatcher was a climate change pioneer. In fact, one of the first. Mentioning climate change at the Royal Society in 1988, she told scientists that climate change warranted government action to diminish pollution and promote sustainable development. She also threw her weight behind the global efforts to phase out CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons.
Are you sure?
I swear to you.
No!
This is where I think some people got Thatcher wrong. I think she is an extremely radical liberal.
I think Thatcher's from the future.
I think she's
also
someone
she got
so
rid
left,
of-
she's right.
She got like Omar said, she did get rid of coal. And that's a big
But I was
problem.
joking, and now he's telling us that it's real. That was a joke.
She was one of the first people to really put serious weight behind the green debate.
How did she do it so early? Because I don't think anyone believed in global warming in the 80s.
But this is the thing that people, from my reading, this is the misconception about Thatcher. It's a lot of it was freeing stuff up, taking the bolts off of things and letting them fly. And so she wanted to get rid of the old.
All right,
machines,
so,
old methods,
what we got?
The old ways of doing things, the dirty, clunking machinery, and it followed naturally through to her attitude towards the environment. She was a deregulator, if that's not sort of conflicted to mention that. So I sometimes think when you read some of her stuff, lowering taxes, letting people buy their own council houses, there's if you take the right-wing thing out of your brain, there's liberal elements to what she was doing.
She could have dressed up with different words and made it seem really positive and fluffy and all.
But there's nothing wrong with buying your council flat if then you're going to use the money to build more council flats. Then she didn't do that. She just stigmatised living in a council estate. And then if you're going to say she, was big into, green energy and stuff, surely you need a certain amount of government control and regulation to make sure that people are being energy efficient. And that was opposite of everything that she was aiming
Of course, but she pardon the pun, ignited the debate.
Yeah, I mean, and, she had ideas that were before her time, which we consider very liberal ideas. I mean, for example, her famous statement, "I think I can do business with this man," was Gorbachev. She had a huge part to play in the fact that whole détente worked out. She was the first person that said, "Yeah, I can talk to him," and that was huge.
And she was so strong as well. Like, she used Brexit in an afternoon. She's like, "We are leaving."
But
Bye.
also, she was a Eurosceptic. So it wasn't like it was all foreigners that she just didn't like. It was the idea of Europe and big government, I think, and many other things. But with Gorbachev, literally, that was so forward-thinking. And I mean, now we don't even remember what the Cold War was like. But it was tricky.
It's almost like a Corbyn thing to do.
It's very tricky.
It's a Corbyn-y type thing to do. Going, who's the people you think my enemy's right? Popping over for some lunch. Let's sort this nonsense out.
So how can you say she cares about the environment when you think how many cans of hairspray went into her hair every day?
I really thought you were going to say something of weight and anger then. I was like,
Maybe that's why she knew about greenhouse gases. She knew how much she was spraying that oil.
that ripped a hole in the ozone. Okay, let's, I think, can we agree, it's a massive tick on the genius side, this group.
But this is 88, so this is like before it became cool.
Yeah.
Like, she must have said, "Oh, the environment," and everyone in that room must have gone, "What?" And they couldn't even Google environment, because there was no Google. They must have just gone home and just been like, "What is she on
No,
about?"
but when you think about it, she didn't put any of her political weight behind it. She was that concerned about the environment. That's not what she's remembered for. It's great that she was aware of it, but it wasn't exactly what, she wanted her legacy to be.
I mean, I meant to go overshadowed by other things.
But I think a lot of people, if you said, "Oh, as an environmentalist, do you like Thatcher?" I think a lot of people would say, "No, I don't." And it's like, well, go read this interesting paper about some stuff that no one else knew about back then, or at least not us. Like, I would never in a million years have thought, yeah, environmental. Margaret.
We should probably look in envelope 2 just to make sure we've not missed anything.
This amazing Dame Judi Dench film I've been meaning to go see. It says Tea with Pinochet.
I know, that's wonderful. It's going to be McKellen, obviously, as Pinochet. Dench as Thatcher. No, in 1999, Thatcher visited former Chilean dictator General Pinochet, who at the time was under house arrest in London. She thanked him for being an ally in the Falklands War and for bringing democracy to Chile. Pinochet was an annual visitor to her house in London after he stepped down from power in 1990, always sending flowers and chocolates, but never milk, on his arrival in England. His regime in Chile in 1780 was known for torturing tens and thousands of his opponents. I'd imagine the ones who didn't democratically vote for him. That's my type of democracy. How are you going to vote with broken fingers, you bellhead? Smash! So, this she was famous for. Was she just someone who used other nasty bastards in power to shore up her own power?
Yes, like every politician of that stature.
Or is it what we were talking about before? Was she keeping your enemies closer? Is she one of these guys?
Can I just jump in on this one? I think it's possible to keep somewhat... Pinochet was it was brutal what he was doing, and for her to entertain him personally, it's one thing if you have to meet someone, you know, politically, but personally, to have tea with that person, I find it a very evil point. I can't find any genius in that.
Are we saying that this is like an extraordinary thing of a politician being nice to a dictator?
Personal. Politics, when you're, it's your job.
What about Corbyn?
So they were mates. They were like, what about Corbyn? Yeah, let's talk about Corbyn.
What about Corbyn? Who's he had tea with recently?
But there's a different thing, because one, if you're trying to...
Theresa May's been out with the Saudis recently. Pretty good sell, had a nice lunch in Israel.
But Theresa May had an official meeting with the Saudis. Preeti Patel, what she was doing, God knows, you know. But that was an official meeting. It was a state meeting. Theresa May is not hanging out in her personal house with the Saudi guy.
No, true. Sorry, I cut you off. Sorry.
Well, I'm just saying, there's a difference between saying, oh my God, isn't this leader fantastic? And I'm legitimate, I can't pronounce that word. I'm giving the thumbs up to his regime. And then what Corbyn and Thatcher were doing in the past is, if you're trying to bring extremists into the political process, you do have to reach out to people that you think are a little bit icky, because you have to bring them in to try and find a political solution. It's very different to, hey, come around my house, let's have chocolate. It's different.
I mean, I just find that.
But
I think it's good. I think it's good to meet the nutters of the world. Like, I'm so happy that Trump is meeting Kim Jong-un. And that's going to be an amazing bit of belly, isn't it?
That should definitely be pay-per-view, shouldn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
I think Joshua one Saturday, Kim Jong-un Trump the next Saturday.
Because no one's ever taken Kim Jong-un seriously, and I think it's because he looks like a 12-year-old.
Dennis Rodman has.
Dennis Rodman. I don't think anyone takes Dennis Rodman seriously anymore. So I just think it's going to be amazing. He's met his match. All these years, Kim Jong-un's been like, I'm going to nuke you. And everyone's gone, no beef, City, Kim. But this time, Trump's like, no, I'm going to nuke you. And Kim Jong-un's gone, can we talk?
So he hasn't. I'm not buying his nonsense weapons. I know we're going off a bit of a diversion.
I don't think it's a nuclear, but and I think it's an Xbox.
He's the kid at school. Like, you better not mess with me. My dad's a policeman. Is he? Yeah. He's like, oh my, where are your weapons then? They're behind that curtain. They're not there, are they, Kim? What's he got?
Canada.
My girlfriend's in Canada. There's one of those. Please, by the way, please don't kill us. That was.
The North Koreans are like, oh, this podcast must be shut down. You are not welcome in Pyongyang Comedy Club, Russell Kane.
Everyone's going to kill us on this podcast, the North Koreans.
Guys, we're all dead. Let's go to Rome. What do you think of Thatcher now in 2018? What's the sort of reflection of her?
I don't think there's one. No. I think it's I think it's divided along the same lines as it is everywhere in the world, depending on where you are on the political spectrum. To the left, you think, what was she thinking? And if you're more on the right, you think, well, she did good accounting. She was a greengrocer's daughter. She came and she made the budget work. She balanced the books, and she taught people about hard work. She made the pie bigger. She got them to buy houses. You know, you have that all those macroeconomic arguments.
I think maybe we should we fling open the... Have we done that one? Tear open the last envelope. Or,
Rent.
Yeah, let's rent.
So my word for Margaret Thatcher is trailblazer.
Yeah.
And God, yeah, all the things she trailblazed.
Well, there's so many things in here. I wish this was. It does feel wrong having this length of podcast for Thatcherism, so I'm doing my best here. But blazed a trail. I'm going to headline with the woman in charge of men, but there's other stuff underneath it. Here's an example. In 1979, they'd never had a female head of state visit before. So they offered her 20 female karate experts, or I want to say ninjas, because it's just better. They offered her 20 ninjas to guard her while she was going around, to which she said, have any of the other states got 20 karate experts? No, they don't. She said, well, I won't be requiring them, because I'm not a woman, I'm a prime minister. Mic drop feminism. So that's just a good anecdote.
Okay, you made the sale. We finally got currency to...
One, yeah, she's the first female head of state, but two, was she? That's the last thing she wanted to be thought of, was a woman, really. Wasn't she?
Margaret Thatcher for me is the absolute pinnacle of a smurfette.
Go on.
So a smurfette is, there's a certain type of woman who loves being the only girl. Like, I'm the only woman, I'm the smurfette. Like, I'm just one of the lads. And the minute a smurfette, if you're another woman, and if you walk into a smurfette's territory, oh, they're vicious, they are horrible to other women. She was the first prime minister. Just because a woman does something, doesn't make it necessarily feminist.
No.
Like, it's so, like, stupid. And she never brought up, I think she had one woman in her cabinet for a little bit, and then she got rid of her. She did nothing to bring other women up. And then what's the point? That's not feminist person.
The argument is, across the anti-stuff, I'll try and do it fresh. The argument is that simply by being the first female prime minister, she does an accidental glass ceiling smash with her rock solid perm. Didn't mean to smash it, but have. Yeah. Smash the glass ceiling with your perm. That's life, guys. Yeah. Anyway, bands, where were we?
And that's one of the good things about Barack Obama, is that he let his existence and his success speak for himself. And the closest he got to explicitly talking about his race, certainly in the early days, was they said this day would never happen. He didn't walk on stage like spitting bars and like putting the White House on MTV Cribs and going, yeah, there's a brother in the house.
That's how it finished, though. So sad to see him take you there at the end.
So what are you saying, that it's different what Thatcher did from Obama?
No, it's the same thing.
No, I think it was the same thing.
Accidental glass ceiling.
But he very much more, like, he embraced his blackness. He brought in other African
with her handbag and her turban and her prim Englishness.
All of that defines femininity. It's a fluid concept.
But what about hold the ninjas, I'm badass? Hold the ninjas, I'm badass.
Yeah,
that's girl power. That's girl power before Mel B.
Obama, that point, you know, that just by virtue of being black, it didn't change anything. But it
did though.
Yeah,
she lowered her voice. She surrounded herself with men.
I could lower my voice. Like that's a shame.
No, but also maybe she had to do those things in that role.
We all do that. You get a bit of power. You get on telly. You do something. We all change a bit. Not many people like sort of are frozen exactly as they were when they were at uni or when they first started. The camera swings round, the elections, Victoria, whatever job you do, you become head chef in a restaurant. There is a change in posture. Come on.
You can see it in Obama.
But Obama brought up other black people around him, and that's what she never did.
Agreed. So let's talk about some other trails.
Yeah, she didn't bring any black people up around her.
No, she didn't. Well, I'm
allowed to vote, that's enough.
Well, I'm going to argue that she did, because in my opinion, and this is one of the weirdest things, considering where I lie on the political spectrum, there is no doubt in my mind, not even a 1% doubt, I would not be sat here today and have the lovely life I have as a touring stand-up comedy, all the wonderful things I've done, had my old man not bought his own council house. Taking away the evil of her not building more, she created the upper working class, in my opinion. It wasn't there before. You were like, oh, blimey, I'm happy just to have the council house. Never mind, after my dad was a barrister, I never will be. Grateful to clean the chimney, But all of a sudden, my old man well as making plenty of loads of money in one go, as soon as we owned our own council house, the philosophy of my house changed. My dad was still an uneducated manual labourer. My mum was still a cleaner. Yes, I was still in a dodgy part of London. But the chest went out, the spine went erect, and it was just this idea that there was something beyond the back garden that my mum and dad's generation was unknown. Now, regardless of the negative aspect, she liberated a lot of people like me. I know I still sound bit of shit, but I got to university, I've got a first in English, I've got this amazing life. Thank you, Thatcher. Thank you.
Wow! Wow!
Discuss.
Ladies and gentlemen!
Discuss. Go on.
But it's social movement. So think of the 60s, where there is so much working class voices in literature and in cinema and working class actors and music. It was such an exciting time because there was real progress. That all stopped under Thatcher. You know,
well, the gap widened between the very rich and the very poor. And in the 60s, what you have is what I call sort of showcase for people. So you get them on question time going, well, I went to a comprehensive, and I moved into Oxford. Do you know what a massive, pathetic, pointless exception? But you don't add to the debate. What happened under Thatcher was the normal people, not the playwright, not the artistic elite, just normal average Dave and Julie from Essex got lifted up. They're willing to graft hard and say, you could just latch on and grow, buy a property.
I mean, renting in India is considered like there's something bad that's happened. So when I moved here and I rented a flat, and then my mother came to visit and she said, oh, you're renting. How long will this tragedy continue? And I was like, what do you mean?
But imagine if Mandela, one of the first things he'd achieved was any person who was in state housing was allowed for 5 years to buy their own state housing and be their own self-made. We'd be like, oh my God, Mandela, what a visionary. He gave these people a step up. Are we not, just because she was this white Tory, mind-closing powerhouse of non-liberal politics from some people, but we're colouring the past in the
I think that is exactly what it is. And a lot of people would say the reason why the left hates this particular politics is because when working class people start making a bit of money and aspiring, they're not absolutely chained to going Labour. They might actually think as individuals instead of just saying, I'm Labour, my dad's Labour, my granddad's Labour, I don't care who's in charge, they could put a stuffed puppet as party leader and I'll still vote Labour, and they hate it when that's the case.
I mean, that is
some people say that. Some people say that.
So we're being a bit theatrical, listeners. Try not to smash your iPhone up, whatever you're listening to it on. But we have to be.
I'm now being dragged out of the BBC building.
We have to be a touch extra pro-Thatcher. A, because the British and B, because I'm so sick of being told there's a liberal consensus.
Can I tell you why I've got so much emotion about it? It's because brown people get the same treatment that working class people used to get. Is that you're brown, so you have to vote for a particular political party because the other guys are racist or the other guys hate. And I just think treating people as a block rather than as people is not very nice.
Yeah, well, you would say that. Okay, so we are going to have to wrap up. If you fundamentally disagree with someone's politics, can you still accept they are acting from their own genuinely held content, and that they are capable of doing some things that are good? Just hold that in your head. Regardless of what you think, I'm trying to take away my 500 different themes I use in my Caroline Williams love affair. To say she was a political genius in some of the things she did for the first time. Possibly, or not, evil mind-closing felon. So let's have Cinder's go first on this one. Evil or genius, Margaret Thatcher. If this one swings genius, it could be shut down. So Liberal consensus, remember, BBC uncovered in hummus. While recording this uncovered in hummus, right next to some dry tomatoes.
What I would say, and I don't feel as
invested.
No, I am invested, but I don't feel as it's not my place in the way it is. I think Grania and Omar's to have a view on this. I didn't live here at the time, but I've studied a lot about it. I did political science and economics in university.
My God.
What I will say is that there are many things about Thatcher from an economics point of view that I admire, but I believe it might have been possible to do it with a little bit more compassion and gentleness for the inequality that was coming in its wake.
Push a button. Room 101 or room 102? Evil or genius? We've not edited this gap in, by the way. Ronya, exactly the same thing, but just in a less amount of time.
I would say, deep in her heart, in her deep, deep heart, with all her best intentions, she was deeply evil.
Oh, Omar, it's just academic, but let us know how you would have voted.
To our Welsh listeners, of course, she's evil. Yay. I think she did what she believed in. She changed the country in huge ways. And she won loads of elections. And as an Egyptian, I have to sort of respect the outcome of elections because I know how bad it is when people go, we don't like you, we want a new guy, get the army.
Hashtag Mubarak.
So I think from her perspective, she was a genius.
Well, it's 2-1. We're not unanimous. Thatcher.